author, speaker, traveler, Stephanie Elizondo Griest joins us to talk about her latest book, Art Above Everything. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
I'm thrilled to be here.
And happy Sunday to you.
Happy Sunday.
So you're from Corpus.
I'm from Corpus Christi.
Tell us more about your background, Stephanie.
Yeah. Well, you know, about 100 years of my family are from the King Ranch. So we work
nice.
in Ñeños.
One of my favorite places, let me tell you.
Favorite places, absolutely. Yes. So I'm very proud of being a Kenyan. And I grew up. I went to Tom Brown. I went to Yeager Elementary School. Went to Carroll High School.
Nice.
And then I set off.
I love that. And I love that you set up, but then you come back.
Always
you come back to your roots.
Yeah, my family's here. And yes. And Corpus Christi has really been a muse of mine. Actually, my last book, All the Ancients and Saints, I dedicated to Corpus Christi. Yeah.
I want to talk about that book also.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the book that you're here for, Art Above Everything.
Yeah.
So tell us about that book.
Okay, so Art Above Everything, in a way, it's really about all my previous 4 books. It's about the sacrifices that we make to be artists. Okay. So throughout my 20s and 30s, I was continuously quitting one job after another, leaving one community after another, leaving my family, leaving my partners, in order to follow story after story after story after story. I didn't really have health insurance during a lot of that period of time. I made almost no money. And there was even a 3-year stretch where I didn't have a place to live. I was entirely on the road. And I began asking myself this again and again: is art enough to make all of these sacrifices? Like, what am I doing? This is a bit crazy. So when I finally, at age 40, became a professor at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I just began thinking about how I had spent the previous 20 years of my life, I began really wanting to investigate that question. Is art enough to constitute a fulfilled life? Is it actually worth the sacrifices we have to make it? Because let's face it, it's incredibly difficult to be an artist in these days and getting harder all of the time. So I then decided to start asking other women if the sacrifices they had made for their art felt worthwhile. And I ended up, over the course of the last decade, traveling to 12 different countries. I interviewed over 70 women, and not only other writers, but also actors and sculptors and musicians all over the continent. Yes.
How amazing. You know, I know that whenever we do speak to artists, and I'm not just talking about books, but also sculptures or painters or even musicians, struggling is in there. It's always somewhere in there, because it's not easy, but you want to follow your passion, you want to follow what you love. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
And now you're traveling to over 50 states, you said?
Well, I'm on a book tour now, and I'm going to 28 cities around the country. Yes. But my favorite place always to visit is home, back in Corpus Christi. So I had an amazing event at Barnes & Noble yesterday, and actually K-Space on Friday night, and it's just been so fabulous to be here.
So interviewing all of these people, is there like a message that pretty much most of them agreed on? A message or a feeling or something that they wanted to share?
Yeah. No, thank you for asking that. So every woman really has a different experience that brings them to the page. And as I began traveling around, when I was in, for example, Rwanda, I interviewed a theater troupe there, and they really believe that art is a form of reconciliation, which is incredibly important because Rwanda, as we know, tragically experienced a major genocide in 1994, and they are using theater as a way to bring Hutu and Tutsi on the stage to really talk and engage about what happened in the legacy of the genocide. I went to Romania and interviewed abstract artists who were able to, by virtue of painting abstractly, were able to still create art during their 26-year dictatorship under the Ceausescu regime. So for them, art was a form of dissent. Myself, art became a form of healing, of medicine. About halfway through this book, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And this really became a way, for example, when I lost my hair for chemo, I knew that would be a very traumatic. I'm very attached to my hair,
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. It did grow back, but when I was faced with the looming, the knowledge that I was about to lose it, I decided to turn it into an art project. So I invited over a violinist, an Italian opera singer, a photographer, and a hairstylist, and really played this very dramatic music as we shaved my head. And that is really, it became one of the most moving experiences of my life, and it is absolutely what enabled me to garner up the courage, fortify myself to have this traumatic experience of chemotherapy.
Everybody that you just said, everybody that you invited to do this art is an artist. They had a form of art, and the form of art, you know, any way that you want to express, whether it's writing, whether it's sculpting, whether it's painting, whether it's music, it's a way of expressing yourself and sometimes what you can't say out loud, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Where can we find your book?
Well, thank you for asking.
Okay.
Barnes & Noble has a ton, yeah. So just go down to Barnes & Noble, and actually I left a stack of about 20 that are signed, and you can order it on Amazon. You can go anywhere books are sold, yes.
And briefly tell us about your other books.
My other books, okay, great. Well, it starts off with Around the Block, My Life in Moscow, Beijing, and Havana, and that begins growing up in Corpus Christi, really having a deep sense of wanderlust. You know, as I mentioned earlier, my tios were quinceaños, you know, they rode the range, and I think that sort of wanderlust infused inside my own body. So I just wanted to get out. And the furthest place I could think of when I was in high school was Russia. So I studied Russian, and then I moved to Moscow, and ended up living there for a year, lived in Beijing, lived in Havana, and then I just wrote about what happens when the ideological premise of your country collapses. And that really got me thinking a lot about how I had, even though I'm Chicana and Mexican American, I had not grown up speaking Spanish or having a very deep connection with Mexico. That is what sent me to Mexico next. So I wrote a book called Mexican Enough. I think that's something we all struggle with at Tejanos, you know, like if we don't speak perfect Spanish, or like, I'm a bad Mexican, you know, or what, you know. So this is an investigation into that, what it means to be Mexican American. And then that got me thinking about the border, which is where we're from. And so All the Agents and Saints is a deep dive into life and in consideration of the question, what happens when an international borderline cuts your ancestral land in two? So I'm looking at lives of Tejanos, so Corpus Christi on down south, and then I'm comparing that with the lives of Mohawk Indians who are bisected by the New York and Canadian borderline.
So much amazing information, and if you would like to know more about Stephanie, where can they go? You have a website.
I have a website, StephanieElizondoGriest.com. Yeah, and I'm also on all the socials. Yeah.
All right, so make sure that you look for Stephanie and you go and of course get her book, Art Above Everything, along with all her other books. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's always so good to see someone that's from here to come back on Domingo Live and tell us how well they're doing, and you are. So congratulations.
Thank you so much,
on
Barbie.
all of your success and more success for you. Thank you so much.
Gracias.